relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network. Like I said, coming up right now, we are shifting gears from the world of college back to the NFL and looking ahead, getting an early look into tomorrow night's game, Thursday Night Football, between the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. Now, I know what you're thinking. This game probably will not be as important in the long run as it sounds, but I still think it is. This is perhaps one of the most consequential Week 2 games you'll ever see. Because if you believe that the AFC East is still Buffalo and Miami, based off whether or not, the Jets can get going or what you saw in that game against San Fran, then this game is very important because of seeding implications, because of where you play, most importantly, in the playoffs, should both of these teams get there. So it's going to be a very fun one to dissect, especially in betting terms as well. There's a lot that could happen in this game. Let's start off with the overall money lines and betting lines as well. So right now, with a little bit of movement as the week has gone on in the betting lines. Miami now favored by 2.5, and their money line sits at minus 110. Buffalo's is even, and the over-under did change from 50.5 points to 48.5 points. Now, let's talk a little bit more about the consequences of this game. Because right now, it certainly feels like, based off both teams' performances, this is either going to be a shootout or a Dolphins blowout, if you want a bold take here. Those are the two outcomes I see most likely happening. Let's talk about the first one, because the shootout can always happen in a game like this, can always happen in an interdivisional game, especially a game like this where you have two quarterbacks who kind of have two different styles but could still affect games in different ways. For Josh Allen, it's about taking over himself. It's about making plays out of nothing. For Tua, it's just being the guy who gets the ball to speedy weapons who can get open down the field. And so, with these two different philosophies about playing the game on offense, you would kind of think that this is a shootout. But then let's look at the defensive play, because that's what I think this game will ultimately come down to. How both of these offenses match against these defenses. The Dolphins' defense perhaps was one of the most impressive this past weekend. Yes, it was against the Jacksonville Jaguars team that's still not a finished product, in my opinion. I still think, even though Brian Thomas Jr. had a beautiful touchdown, and Trevor Lawrence, had some moments, it was not by any means a perfect game, and they could have most likely won it. As Andre says, he's going back to his trade analysis, so you like Jacobs more than K9. I wouldn't necessarily say that's the part of the trade that really gets my goat, because I love K9 as a Seattle Seahawks fan. But I think when I look at that overall trade, it makes sense. It makes sense to package a guy like Kincaid, even though it's hard to let him go. As Andre also says, I really want to go for Kyren Williams. I think he can finish top 5. That's yet another guy. I personally don't say that as K9's injury bad. I did not personally see any injury to K9 where I'm at that point where I'm concerned about when he's playing. Says Andre as well. A lot of comments from Andre. Keep them coming, even though it's kind of getting it a little bit out of hand a little bit. I'm trying to process a lot. To go to your point about Kyren Williams, though, he's a guy that I personally do not necessarily have a lot of hope for, because it was just a one-season sample of him being dominant. But he still can hold a lot of weight in this offense, especially with the Puka Nacua injury. A lot of different ways, Getting back to Andre's point about K9 as well, I personally didn't see any point in the game where he looked uncomfortable against the Broncos, to the point where I would be concerned about any sort of injury. I don't necessarily know if he was even injured in this game either way. So let me know about that as well, because I personally watching the game, did not see anything that would strike fear into my heart about whether or not K9 is healthy. But also getting back to the Jacobs more than K9 point, I love K9 as a biased Seattle fan now. But in that trade, it makes sense to let him go because I think that you're getting more balance as well. And if you do plan to pick up McConkey on waivers, like you said, then that also makes your wide receiver room deep enough to the point where I really like it as well. But let's get back to Thursday Night Football as well, because this game could also have a lot of fantasy implications as well. Because at the end of the day, like I said, it will come down to the offenses versus the defenses. And then, like I said, the Dolphins defense was perhaps the most impressive. And we're talking about, yes, maybe it's the overall non-cohesion of the Jacksonville Jaguars. It pays testament that everyone is back healthy. Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, and Jalen Ramsey are now all playing at the same time. So that's a big win for the Miami Dolphins in the first place. But also, look to the other side. Look at the Bills defense. Yes, a lot of people are very high on the Arizona Cardinals offense, but not to the point where they were actually leading for large portions of that game against the Buffalo Bills team that, yes, lost a lot of offensive production, but a lot of people still have high expectations for. But it also is the injury crisis that befell their cornerback room, especially in their secondary. Taron Johnson's out. Bryce Hall's out. And when you think about the Bills, the best part about their defense is that they can heavily rotate at every single position on the field. And losing that and having to call up practice squad, rookie says Andre Verlis at that point. Buffalo is super banged up. I still think that the Dolphins' blow is not so far-fetched at this point because of the fact that with all that speed, now this is a game where I actually like Miami a lot, and not only betting purposes, but also in fantasy purposes, because this is just a game where they can have a lot of fun with it, They can exploit the Buffalo Bills' depleted secondary, and this could be a bloodbath. But I'm giving Buffalo the benefit of the doubt because they are a tough team, if anything. They did come back against the Cardinals. Josh Allen still has the most moxie out of any quarterback. He will do whatever it takes to get that win, especially in this game. So it's ultimately up to you. In terms of over-under, I think this is super easy. I think it will go over either way. If it's a Dolphins blowout or if it's a shootout, I think this will go either way. I will take the over in this game. Now, I think that, as Andre says, who's your pick? I'll get to that in a little bit. This game is just so weird that it's a divisional game because the spread could have been much larger as well. I just want to speak to that point. I'm looking at the spread. Miami favored by 2.5 points. I believe they are the home team. But this spread definitely feels like it could have been bigger. I don't think Vegas took into account how depleted Buffalo is. And yes, Taron Johnson is just a nickel corner, and they still have guys like Benford and Rasul Douglas, who are very underrated secondary in their own right. But I still think this game, either way, will hit the over, whether it's an exciting game or a snooze fest. As to Andre saying and asking who my pick is, I'm going to pick Miami. I think that right now, I just feel like this game is leaning more and more towards them, and the Bills secondary isn't going to magically be able to rotate people in and out. So, that being said, I'm picking Miami. But I don't think it will be a blow. Because Josh Allen is just a guy who I can't underestimate. Yes, there was concerns about his hand and wrist injury like I alluded to yesterday after that second rushing touchdown in that game. But, as Sheppy Sweetsauce said, money line or spread, I would just take the money line here, to be honest with you. Because I don't think this game will really matter in terms of spread. I think that Miami would cover either way. And Andre, who do you like to score touchdowns? I do have a whole prop bet bid, but just to give it to you, I think that this is going to be a fun game. It's going to come down to the wire. I have Miami winning 31-27 on a late touchdown, to your point, Tyreek Hill. And that will kind of spoil a little bit of my prop bets segment. So, at the end of the day, I want it to be an exciting game, but I can definitely see a world where this could be a huge disappointment and Miami could run away with it. Continue letting me know what you think in the comments, but to Andre's point, we are, in this next segment, going to be looking at prop bets. But to kind of conclude this general betting preview, I think if you're a bettor, Thursday night football games are an opportunity to really, really deep dive into some popular bets here. I don't think this game is going to be indicative. It's a divisional game, let's be real. But there are some Thursday night games coming up on the schedule that can be really interesting in terms of betting. Get you some easy wins. As Blue Sea Turtle, thank you. I wanted to go to break, but I did want a comment from someone. So thank you, Blue Sea Turtle. Before we go to break, I got sent a trade in a PPR league. Do you think I should accept it? It is Garrett Wilson and Travis Etienne for Xavier Worthy and Bijan. I actually think you should accept it. I like Xavier Worthy a lot, and Bijan will not be as terrible as he was against a Steelers defensive front that's projected to be one of the best in the league. Whereas Garrett Wilson still needs to find that connection with Aaron Rodgers. I still believe in him. He was personally on my fantasy team, but at the end of the day, I still think it will take time. And Travis Etienne, man, was that fumble disappointing if you were had him in your fantasy roster. I think that, Travis Etienne is one of those interesting guys who you can't necessarily make heads or tails about in that Jacksonville offense. As Andre agrees with my sentiment here. And at the end of the day, Xavier Worthy and Bijan just have more excitement to them. Even though, Xavier Worthy's touches might not be the most. I expect Bijan Robinson to be better as well. So I would definitely accept that trade, especially in a PPR league. Thank you for this comment, but we do have to take a short break. Let me know what you guys think about this segment, particularly in the comments about Thursday Night Football, as we're soon to be sticking with it for our final segment of today's show, where we talk about some prop bets. Andre already really excited for that segment, as I can see. So thank you guys for all your comments. We'll be right back after this short break.